Come to this second part of our topic, organisms and their environment. And today we're looking at the pyramids of energy. In the first video we treated energy transfer, we treated food chain and food webs, we treated the feeding relationship in an ecosystem, and we've treated the pyramids. We started treating the pyramid. We treated the pyramid of numbers and the pyramid of biomass. Now we're going to the pyramid of energy, and we will look at the nitrogen cycle and the population in the entire ecosystem. So this second section, we're going to combine the remaining sub-part of this chapter. Now, before we continue, let's listen to this tutorial.
This video is on the topic of energy pyramids. In order for consumers to gain energy, they must eat other organisms. However, not all the energy gained by a consumer will be available to organisms at the next trophic level. This is because some of the energy is transferred during processes like movement or digestion, and some is lost to the environment as heat or in waste products. It is also possible for energy to be lost when parts of an organism, such as bones, shells, or plant roots, remain uneaten. About 90% of the energy received by trophic level will ultimately be lost in one way or another, meaning that only about 10% is available to organisms of the next trophic level. This inefficient transfer of energy in food chains limits their length, as very little energy is available to organisms at higher trophic levels. For this reason, it is more energy efficient for humans to eat a plant-based diet compared to a meat-based one, since it puts us on a lower trophic level. A pyramid of energy will show the energy stored in the biomass at each trophic level. It will always have a pyramid shape since the stored energy decreases as you move up the food chain due to the energy losses at each trophic level. If we look at the pyramid of energy in the diagram, we can see that the tertiary consumers at the top of the pyramid will only receive about 10 joules of the original 10,000 joules of energy that was available from the producers at the bottom of the pyramid. In an exam, you may be expected to draw a pyramid of energy on graph paper, so make sure that you pick a suitable scale. Now let's look at an exam-style question. You are given an example of a pyramid of energy and asked to calculate the energy that would be transferred to the secondary consumers in the food chain. It is good practice to always show your calculations with questions like this one. The second question asks you to explain why this pyramid of energy only has 4 trophic levels. The command word explain will require you to write a detailed answer. For the first question, we must determine which bar of the pyramid represents the secondary consumers. Remember that the bottom bar of food pyramids will always represent the producers, so the secondary consumers will be 2 bars up from that. We know that only 10% of the energy at each trophic level is transferred to the next one, which we can rewrite as 0.1. Since the secondary consumers are 2 trophic levels up from the producers, it means that they will only receive 0.01 of the energy that is available from the producers. If we do the calculation, we see that the secondary consumers will only receive 480 kilojoules from the primary consumers. For the second question, you have to think about the reasons why there may be only 4 trophic levels in this pyramid. This question is worth 3 marks, but there are quite a few reasons that you could mention here. We know that energy is lost at each trophic level, which is the main reason that the stored energy decreases as we go up the pyramid. You could be more specific here and mention that only 10% of the energy is transferred to the next trophic level, or that 90% of the energy is lost, which would be worth a mark. You could explain how energy is lost. For example, not all parts of an organism are consumed by the next trophic level, and energy is lost in the form of heat or in waste products like urine. This means that there is not enough energy available at the 4th trophic level to support another one. So in summary, pyramids of energy represent the energy present in the biomass of each trophic level in a food chain and will always have a pyramid shape. only about 10% of the energy received by a trophic level will be transferred to the next one. This is because energy is transferred or lost in a variety of ways at each trophic level, which limits the length of food chains in an ecosystem. Don't forget to check out all our other
Okay, so for this one, the biomass, the pyramid of energy, it's about the energy in the food chain. Okay, what is it, and what is being transferred to the next level, trophic level. Now, whatever energy you have at the producer side, only 10% of it will be transferred to the primary consumer. 10% of whatever you have, it's what is going to be transferred to the primary consumer, and 10% of what is in the primary consumer is what is going to be transferred to secondary consumer, and 10% of what is in the secondary consumer is what is going to be transferred to tertiary consumer, and 10% of what is in the tertiary consumer will be transferred to quaternary consumers. So it's about 90% of the energy in a given trophic level is lost. So the representations of the number of organisms by energy, by how much energy they get in the various trophic levels, is called the biomass of energy. It's called the biomass of energy. The representation by the energy they received in the various trophic level in the food chain is called the biomass of energy. Okay, so we say about 90% that is being lost is lost to what? Is about some of them are lost to the undigested part of the body of the organisms. Some are lost to heat. Some are lost to digestion. Some are lost to decomposition, waste product, and all of these things. So only about 10% are being forwarded or be transmitted to the next energy level in the food chain. Is that okay? So that's what we have for this part. Just a brief of tutorial, and then we look at the diagram. Now let's say, so that we can be fast. So let's say we have a producer here. We have a producer here, which is the plant. If it has 10,000 joules of energy, only 10% of that 10,000 joules of energy will be available to the snail, which is the primary consumer. 90% of it will be lost. 90% of this energy will be lost to heat and undigested material in the body of the plants, of the organisms. So whatever is being received in the primary consumer, only 10% will be transferred to the secondary consumer. The remaining 90% will be lost. Whatever is received in the frog, percentage that is received, only 10% will be transferred to the tertiary consumer. So this representation of energy available from one trophic level to another trophic level is called the biomass of energy. Now let's take a look at it. The sunlight in this regard gives 1 million joules of energy. 1 million joules of energy. Now this 1 million joules of energy is not all available to the plants. Not all the energy from the sun that the plant takes. The plant takes, maybe in this regard, for this example, which is the producer of the plant, they take 10,000 joules of energy. Now these 10,000 joules of energy, even if these snails are feeding on the plant, the snails don't get all the whole 10,000 joules. Only 10%. 10% means 0.1. So 10% of 10,000 joules, let's calculate the 10% of 10,000 joules, right? Let's take a look at the 10% of 10,000 joules. Okay, if we do 10% of 10,000 joules, what we get will be what? So we say 10% is equivalent to saying 10 over 100. So it's equivalent to saying 10 over 100. It's equivalent to saying 10 over 100. And 10 over 100 is 0.1. 10 over 100 is what? 0.1. So meaning to get what the first energy level we get, to get what energy that is available to the snail from this 10,000 joule, we have to multiply by 0.1. We have to multiply by 0.1 so that we can calculate what is here. So if we calculate, we get 0.1 multiplied by 10,000. 0.1 multiplied by 10,000. So if we multiply 0.1 by 10,000, we will get what? We get 1,000, right? We get 1,000. So 1,000 joules will be available to the first primary consumer. will be available to the primary consumer. 1000 joules will be available to the primary consumer. 1000 joules will be available here to the primary consumer. 1000 joules will be available here. Again, here, in order to find what energy that is available, the remaining 9000 joules, they are lost. They are lost. They are lost to heat. They are lost to all digestion, waste product, and so many other things. Okay, that causes loss in the system. So the remaining energy, so biomass of energy is how much energy is available in each of the trophic level. The representation of the trophic level with the energy that is available to it. That's what we call the biomass of energy. Biomass of, pyramid of energy. Pyramid of biomass is the representation of dry mass, using the mass of the organisms in each of the trophic level. Or pyramid of number is how many, the number of organisms that are available in each of the trophic level. Okay, in this pyramid of energy is the how much energy that is available in each of the trophic level as well. And we say the energy available is just 10% of what we had in the previous one that will be available to the next trophic level in the food chain. Okay, so if we want to find the next one, we'll say 0.1 as well. 0.1 multiplied by now this 1000, not 10,000 again. If you have to multiply with 10,000, you have to say 0.1 times 0.1 times 10,000, which is 0.01 times 10,000. But we can just say 0.1 times 1000. 0.1 times 1000 to get the next energy is the secondary consumer. That will give us 100 joule. That will give us 100 joule. So in the secondary consumption or the secondary consumer, the energy that is available to them is only 100 joule. It's only 100 joule. If you look at the pyramid, if you look at the pyramid of energy, it will be 100 joule only. Okay? The energy that will be available to them is only 100 joule. And similarly, find 10% of or 0.1 of 100, you get 10. So the tertiary consumer will only get 10 joules. Okay? So let's move on quickly to save time. So we can see what is happening. Energy transfer in human food chain. Let's take a look at human food chain. Humans are omnivores. We've already explained this. Omnivorous animals are those organisms. Omnivorous organisms are those organisms that feed on both plants and animals. They feed on both plants and animals. Okay, human beings are omnivores. Okay, they eat both plants and animals. So let's take a look at the energy transfer in these omnivores. Now, obtaining energy from both plants and animals. Yes, human gets energy from both plants and animals. That's what omnivores are. And this gives us a choice of what we eat. We can either eat beef sauce, we can either eat chicken, green chicken, green beef, grind beef, prime beef, corn beef, crow beef, whatever. We can eat meat, fish as food. We can eat plant food like beans, like rice, like potato, which are plants. We can eat fruit, apple, mango, whatever, which are plants. We can eat, we can eat animal food, chicken, turkey, whatever, which are animals. So we eat both choice. We have both choices. Okay, these choices, however, have impact on the environment, right? Have impact on the environment and what we grow as well. So that's why we have plants, crops, animal farm, animal farm. So you can either do animal husbandry or you do plant crops. So in agriculture, we have two sides of agriculture people get involved in and still do well in these areas. And this gives us a choice of what we eat, like we said already, and what we grow in our ecosystem. Now, think of the following food chain, both living, evolving human being. The wheat plant, they're eaten by cow are eaten by humans. Wheat are also eaten by humans, you see. We can eat wheat directly, or we eat the cow that eat the wheat. So this is, in the case of human, this is the type of energy or the type of food chain that we find available. Okay, now let's go to the next one quickly, which is the nutrient cycle. Okay, before we move on to the nutrient cycle, we will start with the carbon cycle. We'll start with the carbon cycle, and let's take a look at this tutorial before we proceed on the carbon cycle.
This video is on the importance of the carbon cycle. Nutrients such as carbon and nitrogen are not available in unlimited supply, so it is important that they are recycled in ecosystems. This makes it possible for new organisms to exist and grow, which would not have been possible without nutrient cycles. Carbon is a very important element for living organisms because it forms the backbone of vital molecules such as carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. Carbon cycles between the atmosphere and living organisms in the form of carbon dioxide. Can you remember some of the processes that take place in living organisms that involve carbon dioxide? We will take a closer look at this next. Carbon is removed from the atmosphere when it is absorbed as carbon dioxide by plants. Remember that carbon dioxide is a requirement for photosynthesis to occur. The carbon will form part of the carbohydrates that are produced during photosynthesis. From here, it is passed on to other organisms in the food chain by feeding. Another process that will store carbon underground is fossilization, which occurs when plants and animals die in conditions where decomposition cannot occur. The carbon in their bodies will be converted into fossil fuels such as coal and oil. There are several processes releasing carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. One such process is respiration, which occurs in the cells of all living organisms and produces carbon dioxide as a waste product. Decomposers will break down the bodies of dead organisms, as well as the waste products excreted from living organisms, and release the carbon back into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide when they respire. Burning of fossil fuels is another major contributor to atmospheric carbon dioxide, as it releases the carbon that was trapped in these fuels during fossilization. Human activities are affecting the balance between the amount of carbon dioxide released into the atmosphere and the amount being removed from the atmosphere. Deforestation is removing many trees and plants, so less carbon dioxide is removed from the atmosphere. On top of this, our dependence on fossil fuels is releasing large volumes of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. This has led to a significant increase in carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere in recent years, which may have long-term ecological consequences. Now let's look at an exam-style question on the carbon cycle. You are given a diagram of the carbon cycle and you have to answer a few questions on the processes occurring in the cycle. The first question asks you to name processes A and B, while the second question requires you to identify the letters representing respiration. These command words only require one-word answers, so don't waste time trying to write sentences here. Process A represents the release of carbon dioxide from fossil fuels, which is achieved by combustion. B represents the process by which carbon dioxide is removed from the atmosphere by plants, which could only be photosynthesis. For the second question, you need to remember that respiration is a process that occurs in living organisms, and it will release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. The arrows that represents this would therefore be C and E. Note that you need to give both letters in order to gain 1 mark here. So, in summary, the carbon cycle refers to the movement of carbon in the form of carbon dioxide between the atmosphere and living organisms. Carbon is removed from the atmosphere by photosynthesis and passed on to organisms by feeding. It is returned to the atmosphere by respiration in plants, animals, and decomposers, as well as the combustion of fossil fuels. Human activities such as deforestation and increased combustion of fossil fuels are leading to an increase in atmospheric carbon dioxide levels. Don't forget to check out all our other fantastic revision resources here at Save My Exam.
Okay, so that's the introduction of carbon cycle or nutrient cycle. So in nutrient cycle, we take carbon as a case study. Why we take carbon as a case study? Because carbon is an important element in the nutrient formation. Because carbon is found in the carbohydrate, it's found in protein, and it's found in lipid, which is fat food. So since carbon is super important in our meal, in our food, hence we take the carbon cycle as our bane or as our example to use for the nutrient cycle. So nutrients such as carbon and nitrogen, they are not endless resources, okay? So it's like a chain, it's like a circle. We get them, we release them, we use them, they disappear, we get them again, and so it's a circle. It's being recycled continuously. Okay, as this takes place, carbon is taken out of the atmosphere in the form of carbon dioxide. It's taken out of the atmosphere in the form of carbon dioxide. Like the plants, for example, they take the carbon in the atmosphere in form of carbon dioxide. It goes into the plant leaves and used in a process called photosynthesis to make food. the food we eat, the glucose, which is carbohydrate, and the proteins and the lipids. So the plants take out the carbon in the atmosphere in the form of carbon dioxide. So, okay, so these plants, when they die, some of these, first of all, when they're eating in the feeding relationship, when they be eaten by other organisms, the carbon dioxide or the carbon is being transferred to other organisms, this as much as they be eating in the ecosystem. Okay, so if the energy is being transferred from one form till probably when these organisms die, this carbon returns to the soil. Okay, this carbon that returns to the soil is used in the long run to produce coal and oil, petroleum. This coal and petroleum, by process of combustion, releases a lot of carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. It releases a lot of carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. And by so doing, we get carbon dioxide. And another way we get carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is we, human beings, when we feed from the carbon food, like carbohydrate, when we respire, we also release carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. So two ways whereby the carbon dioxide is released back into the atmosphere is by our own respiration. When we breathe out, or breathe out carbon dioxide, we breathe in oxygen and we breathe out carbon dioxide. When we breathe out carbon dioxide, we release this carbon dioxide or carbon element or carbon compound into the atmosphere. Another way is not only the combustion of oil or petroleum product. So when they be combust, when you burn the petrol in car, it releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. During combustion process, carbon dioxide is released back into the atmosphere. One way it gets out of the atmosphere is by photosynthesis, by photosynthesis and usually by photosynthesis. Okay, so these are the things we're talking about in carbon cycle. So let's take a look at the diagram that shows that characteristics. Remember, the sunlight energy is always needed in each of these cycles because this energy is used by the plant to stimulate photosynthesis, to take place. So the carbon in the atmosphere is taken by the plant, the leaves of the plant, and is being used to photosynthesize to produce food. Now, once the carbon is used to produce food, this food is eaten by other organisms, which in turn breathe out and releases carbon back into the atmosphere. Each of these organisms that feed on them, the cow, the human being, they breathe out and they release carbon back into the atmosphere. One way the carbon gets back to the atmosphere. Okay. Now, these organisms, when they die, they return carbon dioxide to the soil. They return carbon dioxide into the soil. Okay, as waste product. So over millions of years, they form a petroleum product. And not only when the plants and the animals, when they die, they both, during fossilizations of the dead plants of the animals occur in the specific condition. So during fossilization, or during the decaying process of the matter, or the organic matter of the organisms, carbon is stored in fossil, will be converted to fossil fuel, which when extracted by oil and gas company, and then they flare, they burn it, and then they release carbon back into the atmosphere. So one way of getting the carbon back into the atmosphere is by combustion. By combustion, in the exam question. One way of getting the carbon back into the atmosphere is by combustion. Another way is by respiration. Then one way of taking the carbon out of the atmosphere is by what? By photosynthesis. By photosynthesis and by decomposition, okay, or by decay of organic matter. So we get the carbon on Earth into the soil. Is that okay? So this diagram is called the carbon cycle, and it's very important and necessary for our. Now another one is the nitrogen cycle. These two cycles, nitrogen and carbon, they are used for manufacturing of food. The protein we need, nitrogen has to be added, not only carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Nitrogen has to be to make any food protein. Apart from carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen has to react with it in order to form protein food. So on that note, we take a look at the second most important element in our meal, in our food, or which forms our nutrient, which we need to take a look at. So on that note, we listen to this tutorial briefly before we move on.
This video is on the importance of the nitrogen cycle and is intended for students studying the extended syllabus only. Nitrogen forms an important part of amino acids, which are joined together to form different proteins. Living organisms therefore need a supply of nitrogen in order to make proteins. However, plants and animals are unable to absorb nitrogen directly from the air. This is because nitrogen gas forms a very stable molecule with strong bonds that are difficult to break. It must therefore be converted to a form that can be more easily absorbed by organisms. Plants, for example, can absorb nitrogen in the form of nitrates in the soil. Nitrogen can be removed from the air and converted into substances that are more easily absorbed in a couple of ways. The first way is by nitrogen-fixing bacteria, which are found in the soil and root nodules of legumes such as peas and beans. These bacteria have the ability to convert nitrogen gas from the air into nitrates in the soil. The second method by which nitrogen can be converted into nitrates is by the action of lightning. This breaks the bonds with the nitrogen gas so that the nitrogen atoms can bind to oxygen to form nitrous oxides, which can dissolve in rainwater and leach into the soil. Plants are able to absorb the nitrates in the soil and make proteins. Animals will obtain nitrogen from the proteins in the food they eat, which could come from either plants or other animals. Nitrogen ends up back in the soil as ammonium compounds when animal waste such as urine and feces are broken down by microorganisms. When plants and animals die, the proteins in their bodies are also broken down by the microorganisms involved in decomposition. Plants are unable to absorb ammonium ions, so nitrifying bacteria will first convert it into nitrites before converting it into nitrates during the process of nitrification. This enables nitrogen to be incorporated into plant proteins again, and the cycle can continue. Nitrates may also be converted back into nitrogen gas by the action of denitrifying bacteria during a process called denitrification. Make sure that you know the difference between nitrogen fixing, nitrifying, and denitrifying bacteria so that you do not get confused during an exam. Now let's look at an example of a multiple choice question that you may encounter in an exam. You are given a diagram of part of the nitrogen cycle and asked to identify the letter that represents a process requiring nitrifying bacteria. Remember that nitrifying bacteria will convert ammonium compounds into nitrites and then nitrates during the process of nitrification, so the answer would be B. Here is another example of an exam-style question that you may encounter. You are given part of the nitrogen cycle and asked to state two ways in which process R can occur. Process R represents the fixation of atmospheric nitrogen into nitrate ions. Remember that the command word state requires answers that are expressed in a clear and concise manner. It does not require long-winded answers. One way in which nitrogen fixation can occur is by the action of nitrogen-fixing bacteria. Remember that these are found either free living in soil or in legume root nodules. The second way in which nitrogen can be converted into nitrates is by the action of lightning, which forms nitrous oxides that dissolve in rainwater. So in summary, living organisms need nitrogen to make proteins. Plants can only absorb nitrogen if it has been converted into nitrates. This is done by the action of nitrogen-fixing bacteria and lightning. Nitrogen is returned to the soil in the form of ammonium compounds by microorganisms involved with the breakdown of animal waste and decomposition. The action of nitrifying bacteria will convert ammonium compounds back into nitrates during nitrification, while denitrifying bacteria will remove nitrates from the soil by converting it back into nitrogen gas during denitrification. Don't forget to check out all our other fantastic reviews.
Okay, so we've just listened to the tutorial on this. So we'll just do a quick summary. Nitrogen is a very important element in the making of protein, right? Neither plants nor animals can absorb it from the air directly. We cannot absorb nitrogen directly from the air. So plants cannot use it directly from the air. Animals cannot use it directly from the air. So it needs to be taken to the soil and be changed to something else, right? And the two processes whereby this nitrogen can be returned to the soil from the atmosphere is by nitrogen-fixing bacteria. The nitrogen-fixing bacteria will return the nitrogen to the soil as nitrate. You know, it only can be used by plants as nitrate. Cannot be used as nitrogen. No plants can use it directly as nitrogen, and no animal can use it directly as nitrogen. So by one process of nitrogen-fixing bacteria, the nitrogen in the air or nitrogen oxides in the air can be returned to the soil to form what we call the nitrates. And another way is by lightning, okay? So these are two ways in which the nitrogen in the air can be returned to the soil to form nitrate. And this nitrate can be absorbed by the plant and used by the plant to manufacture protein food. Plants absorb the nitrate and they find in the soil and use the nitrogen in it to make the protein. They absorb nitrate, but they only use the nitrogen in it to make the protein food. Animals, they eat the plants or other animals, and then they get the nitrogen they need from the protein in the plant or from other animals that they've eaten. Now the waste from the animal, after the animal, they poo-poo, the waste, the urine and the feces from the animal sends nitrogen back into the soil in the form of ammonia compound. Okay, when this animal that have eaten the plant, they eat the plant. When they eat the plant, they eat the nitrogen from the plant, from the protein of the plant. So when they give out urine or feces, then they send nitrogen back into the soil in form of what? Ammonia. They send nitrogen back into the soil in form of ammonia compound. Okay, what we call the urea, in form of ammonia compound, which contain nitrogen. Now this ammonia compound, when the animals and the plants, they die, the decay and all the proteins inside them are broken down into ammonium also. They also broken down into ammonium. So two ways in which ammonia compound return to the soil is by feces, by the waste of the plants or of the animal, and also by the death of the plants and the animal. So when they die, they return ammonium, not ammonia, return ammonia compounds back into the soil by the decomposer. Now when that happens, the plants can't absorb the ammonia compound directly. The plant cannot take the ammonia compound. Okay, so a second type of soil bacteria called the nitrifying bacteria. Nitrifying bacteria will decompose the ammonia into nitrate. We decompose a nitrifying bacteria will decompose the ammonia into nitrate, which can be used by the plant, which can be used first into nitrites and then into nitrate. First, it converts the ammonia compound into nitrites, and then from nitrite to nitrate. Now, it is the nitrate that the plants will now use again, okay, for further photosynthesis, for further making of protein, which can be absorbed by the plant, okay? So the cycle goes on. But apart from the nitrifying bacteria, which decomposes the ammonium into nitrite and then to nitrate, there is also this ammonia compound. How is being returned to the atmosphere? Okay, how is being returned to the atmosphere as nitrogen is by another bacteria called the denitrifying bacteria. Right? There is a third very type of anaerobic bacteria called the denitrifying bacteria found in poly-aerated soil, okay, which will help to return the nitrogen back into the soil, So we have nitrifying bacteria which convert ammonium to nitrite to nitrate, and then we have denitrifying bacteria which will return the ammonia into nitrogen in the soil. Okay, so these are the processes that are taking place in the nitrogen cycle. This diagram is the nitrogen cycle. Excuse me. Here is the nitrogen in the atmosphere. We said this nitrogen in the atmosphere cannot be used directly by plants and cannot be used directly by animals. So first it needs to be returned to the soil. First by nitrogen fixing, by two methods, nitrogen fixing bacteria. Okay, nitrogen in the atmosphere is returned to the soil by nitrogen fixing bacteria in the soil, okay? And so that it will change the nitrogen to nitrate, which the plants can use to grow, okay, to produce protein, okay? Another way it's also returned to the soil is by nitrogen fixation by lightning method. Nitrogen bacteria and by lightning method. So nitrogen will be returned to the soil and the plants will use it, will convert it to nitrate and use it to grow. And the plants will be eaten by the animals, okay, production of amino acid. The plant will produce amino acid and then when the animal feed on them, they eat protein. Now, when they poo-poo, or they give urine, when they urinate or they poo-poo, that process is called deamination. It's called deamination. By releasing this nitrogen content in them in form of protein, will be returned to the soil as what? Ammonia compound. As ammonia compound. Okay, as ammonia compound. The decomposition of the plants and animal protein by microorganisms will return ammonia ion into the soil. Okay, we return ammonia ion into the soil. The plants cannot use ammonia ion. This ammonia ion, another process called nitrification, okay, or by nitrifying bacteria, we convert the ammonia ion into nitrate. Ammonia ion into nitrate. First to nitrite, then to nitrate. First to nitrite, even if it's not shown here, then to nitrate. And then this nitrate is used, is the equivalent that the plant needs, okay, that the plant use, okay. So that's that. Then the last process is denitrifying bacteria, which we call, the process called denitrification. The process whereby the nitrate in the soil can return nitrogen to the atmosphere. The nitrate in the soil, the process whereby the nitrate in the soil returns nitrogen to the atmosphere is called denitrification. It's called what? Denitrification. So there are few words terminology you need to know in the nitrogen cycle. You need to know the first way the nitrogen in the atmosphere is returned to the soil, by nitrogen fixation by nightly and by bacteria, by fixing bacteria. So they bring the nitrogen in the soil into nitrate, which the plants use to grow. Then when the plant grow, animal feed on the plant, the feces and the urine returns nitrogen in form of ammonia into the soil, and the dead body of the plants and animal returns nitrogen into the soil as ammonia. Now another set of bacteria we feed on this called the nitrifying bacteria. The process is called nitrification, and which returns the ammonia to nitrite to nitrate. And then when it becomes nitrate, the plants will again use them to grow and produce food and protein food for other organisms. But this nitrate also is being lost to the atmosphere by a process called denitrification, or by denitrifying bacteria. Okay, by denitrifying bacteria. And the process itself is called denitrification. And then the nitrate ions will be returned to the atmosphere as nitrogen. So this process is called nitrogen cycle. This process is called nitrogen cycle. Now let's go to the last section of our today's class, which is called population. After this last section, then we are almost done with the entire chapter 19, which is organisms and their environment. Now, first of all, let's quickly look at the definition of population. Number of organisms, same species of organisms that are living in the environment. The population is defined as a group of organisms of one species. If you're looking at the mouse, how many mouse are in the environment. If you're looking at human being, how many human beings are in this world? About 8 billion human beings are in this world. If you're looking at plant, not just all plant, like one species of a plant. Okay, how many of that species of the plants are in this dunya? If you're looking at crabs, how many species of crabs how many numbers of crabs are living in this or in a given environment? It may not be the whole environment in this world, but a specific environment that you are referring to. A specific environment that we're referring to. So population is defined as a group of organisms of one species that living in the same area at the same time. Species of organisms of space species living in the same area at the same time. Now let's take a look at other definitions that are related to population, like community. Community is defined as what? We define community as all of the populations of different species in an ecosystem. If you talk about your community, for example, if you have a community, you're talking about your community, it includes the human beings, the different plants, the small mouse, rat, that are all the plants that are in that environment. So different population of different species that live in the same environment is called community. It's called community. So in an ecosystem that lives in the same ecosystem is called community. So an ecosystem is defined as the unit containing the community of organisms and their environment, interacting together, interacting with one another, and interacting with all those. Okay, so ecosystem is, you are talking about a single unit, like a unit that contains communities of different organisms, community of different organisms that are living together. That's what we call ecosystem. Now let's take a look at population growth. Factors that make the population to increase, to boom, to grow, It's are limited to the following things that we're going to talk about. Food. Factors that cause growth in population is number one is food. Okay, when there is food, then food availability, then the number of organisms living in that environment will increase. Okay, the different species of organisms will increase, meaning in a given community or ecosystem will increase. Water. Okay, water, food, water. If there are no food and water, either the organism dies or they move away from that environment. So if you want organisms to increase in an environment, an ecosystem, we have to make food available, water available, and living space. There must be a lot of space for every organism to cohabit, to live together. Now, those which are the best adapted to this or to their environment generally increase their population at the expense of those who are less well adapted to that specific environment. So how much populations of each of the species will increase is about adaptability. If you are able to adapt in a given environment, then you populate a lot. You populate a lot. If other species that also came to that environment do not get acquainted or adapted to that environment, then their population will be less in that particular environment. Remember, population is about group of organisms of the same species in a given environment, okay, in a given ecosystem. Now, why community is different species of different organisms that are all living in the same ecosystem. Now, population growth in most organisms is controlled by the following three factors: the food supply, the predation availability, and the disease disease outbreak. Food supply, there are a lot of food supply, then there are possibility or chance of possibility that the population of the organism in that particular environment will tremendously increase. And then if there's predator control, like the organisms are not so super consumed, then the population of such specific organisms or species of organisms will also increase in that environment. Then if there's a disease, a particular disease that threatens those organisms in that environment, then the population will decrease. Okay, there are other factors which we look at, like migration, emigration. When people migrate, organisms migrate to that particular environment based on the availability of water, food, and less disease, and all other factors in place, and the migration increases the population of organisms in an environment. Now, the population growth curve. Now, let's take a look at that. If the growth of microorganisms in a fermenter is measured over time, now the population growth looks like the graph as we're going to look at. Okay, so we see population size, and we have against time, population size against time. We have lag phase, exponential, or log phase. That's where you have the rapid growth in this pink color, if I'm not mistaken. And then the green one is the lag phase, like there's not so much growth in population. After a while, you see the population start growing exponentially in big number, probably due to the fact that there's now food, there's water, there's less disease, there's a lot of immigration to this environment. And then after a while, the population becomes stationary, no longer growing. Then after a while, maybe death will start to occur in this orange color area, and then the population start decreasing as such. Okay, so this graph that shows the population curve is called the population growth curve. It's called the population growth curve. Now let's take a look at the different phases. The lag phase, organisms are adapting to the environment before they are able to reproduce. That's what is happening in this green area. The organisms they are trying to adapt to this environment before they are able to reproduce. Because if they are not well adapted to this environment, they will not be able to reproduce. In the log phase, which is this pink color, in the long phase, or what we call the exponential phase, food supply is abundant. There's a lot of food supply. Birth rate has increased. There's rapid birth. There is peace. There's everything. There's food. There's water. So there's a lot of reproduction. So the population is growing very tremendously and doing well. Death rate is low. So there's no much death rate. Okay, growth is exponential and only limited by the number of new organisms that can be produced. Okay, then in the stationary phase, we have the stationary phase, which is the third phase. Population level, we say population levels out due to factors in the environment, such as the nutrient or becoming limited, or it's not being replenished. Birth rate and death rates are now equal. The number of births and number of deaths are equal. there are no much facilities anymore, because we've reached population boom. We've reached boom, and so maybe the hospitals are, in case of human being, the hospitals are no longer enough. Maybe there's war, there's a number of deaths, there's so many deaths. So you see, the death rate and birth rate are now same, and so you can see that the population is no longer growing, and so on and so forth. So in that case, you have the stationary phase. There's no, the birth and death is not more than each other, they're equal to each other. Then the last phase is called the death phase. The death phase. The death phase, here population decreases as death rate is now greater than the birth rate. The death rate is now greater than the death rate. So population will increase tremendously. And population will decrease tremendously. And also, not only because the death rate is small, there could be also problem of food supply, shortage in food supply, shortage in water, and shortage in the metabolic waste. There's a lot of metabolic waste produced by the population have built up to a very high level of toxic in the environment. That is causing disease that is wiping out a lot of people in the environment. So these are the different level in the curve, in the population growth curve. Now let's take a look at the organisms in the environment, the various organisms. Organisms in our natural environments are likely to show population growth like a sigmoid growth curve, because they are affected by many other factors, including changing temperature and light. One of the big factors that are affecting this is a sigmoid growth curve. This is a curve by sigmoid. This curve is called sigmoid growth curve. Many organisms do not have this kind of curve. If plotted, they don't have this kind of population curve. One of the reasons is that there's a lot of problems. One is the changing temperature. Okay, temperature will come to winter. A lot of organisms cannot survive; they die. The light availability for plants to photosynthesize are not so available in many countries, so many of the organisms do not have this this sigmoid growth curve that we demonstrated. Another problem that reduces population, or that do not make the population grow to show this characterization of this curve that we demonstrated, is the predators. If the predator has too much, then some organisms may not have this kind of curve or this growth, exponential growth and exponential decrease in the sigmoid growth curve. Another problem affecting the growth of organisms in an environment is disease. Disease outbreak can wipe out a lot of organisms in an environment. Another problem is immigration. Individual moving into the area. Okay, a lot of people moving into an area. Okay, moving out from an area, moving to an area. Okay, so when in the area where they are moving from, they will not experience this kind of population growth curve. Emigration is also another problem. Emigration is when individuals are moving out. When individuals are moving out from an organism. Not only individual, all organisms generally when they are moving out from an organism. So all of this leads to may not make us have this sigmoid growth curve as it were. Is that okay? May not give us this sigmoid growth curve as it were. So with this, we come to the end of our today's class. Thank you very much for joining us.